Imagine going to the store, right, to just grab a simple box of trash bags.
Yeah, just a normal everyday errand.
Exactly. But you get there, and the shelves are completely bare.
Mm-hmm.
You ask the clerk what's going on, and they tell you it's because of a spiritual failure 4,000 miles away.
Which is just wild to even wrap your head around.
Right. So today we're looking at how a blocked shipping lane in the Middle East cascades into this mundane, everyday inconvenience, and how one particular source uses that exact scenario to diagnose the geopolitical and, well, the metaphysical destiny of an entire nation.
It really is arguably the most fascinating document we've unpacked in a long time. I mean, we are taking a macroeconomic headache, the kind you usually hear discussed on financial news networks with a lot of dry charts.
Oh, yeah,
And
Culligan.
we're filtering it through a profoundly philosophical, almost cosmic framework.
So our mission today is to dive into a highly unconventional transcript. It's from a lecture and Q&A session given in Busan, South Korea, dated April 19th, 2026.
Right, and the question that kicks off this whole text is incredibly tangible for anyone who follows global supply chains.
Yeah, a concerned citizen basically asks the speaker, the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. South Korea relies heavily on the Middle East for crude oil, helium, and naphtha. What do we do?
And just as a quick refresher for you, naphtha is a crucial liquid hydrocarbon that you get from refining crude oil. It's essentially the raw building block for making plastics.
Which means a naphtha shortage isn't just some abstract commodities issue. It translates immediately into a massive shortage of everyday, pay-as-you-go garbage bags in South Korea.
Exactly. The questioner is describing a society on the edge. People are hoarding these bags, inflation is spiking, the exchange rate is completely shocked.
The stock market is taking a dive.
Right. A nation that's heavily dependent on energy imports is suddenly waking up to the fragility of its own domestic stability.
The questioner naturally wants to know how South Korea can secure its energy and supply chains amidst all this global turmoil. You'd expect an answer about, I don't know, diversifying trade partners or investing in strategic petroleum reserves.
Or maybe accelerating renewable energy grids.
Yeah. But, okay, let's unpack this. Because the speaker's answer takes a massive, unexpected pivot.
A huge pivot.
The speaker completely ignores foreign nations, shipping cartels, economic policy, all of it. Instead, they claim that the economic hardship is happening entirely because the people of South Korea are not doing what they're supposed to do.
It is a stunning redirection. The source tells the audience in no uncertain terms that when the domestic population is struggling to find something as basic as a garbage bag, it is because they have neglected their grander cosmic duty.
They've abandoned their post.
Exactly. They abandon their post and the universe is responding.
Now, I have to push back on this because I know what you're probably thinking right now listening to this. How on earth can a geopolitical blockade halfway across the world be the fault of an everyday citizen in Seoul just trying to take out their trash?
It sounds like a huge stretch.
It's like blaming your car's flat tire on the fact that you haven't been meditating enough. Does the text actually bridge that logical gap, or is this purely metaphorical?
Well, the text absolutely bridges it, but to understand the causality, we really have to adopt the internal logic of the speaker's framework.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it hinges on a massive biological metaphor. In this worldview, humanity, like the entirety of global society, is viewed as a giant ancient tree.
Okay.
And in this metaphor, South Korea is not a branch, and it's not a leaf. It is the root.
Okay, so if they are the root, what is the biological function of a root in this specific context?
To draw in nutrients and supply them to the rest of the organism, the speaker invokes a concept tied to Hongik Ingan.
Which is a pretty foundational idea, right?
Yeah, for a bit of historical context, Hongik Ingan is essentially the founding myth and foundational philosophy of Korea, dating all the way back to the legend of Dangun in 2333 BC. It translates roughly to broadly benefiting humanity.
Got it.
So the argument the speaker makes is that South Koreans who are referred to in the text as the descendants of heaven are inherently meant to be global leaders. Their primary spiritual job is to nurture, educate, and elevate the rest of humanity.
But according to the transcript, instead of feeding the tree, the root has been entirely self-obsessed.
Yes.
The text criticizes the population for becoming overly focused on their own internal survival. They're just thinking about what benefits them financially, forming cliques, creating ideological factions. It explicitly calls out the exclusion of communists, posing the question, are they not our brothers too?
Which is a remarkably provocative statement in a country with South Korea's specific geopolitical history.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in this framework, By clinging solely to liberal democracy and shutting out ideological alternatives, the root has stopped processing the necessary nutrients for the whole tree.
Wait, but even if we accept the premise that Korea is the root of this global tree, how does them being inwardly focused practically cause a boat to get stuck in the Strait of Hormuz?
Because in this philosophy, the material world is entirely reactive to the spiritual state of the root.
Hmm.
The inevitable consequence of a root not feeding the tree is that the canopy gets sick. That sickness eventually travels all the way back down into the soil, and the global environment begins to literally strangle the root.
Wow.
Yeah, the source claims that the universe is engineering this exact supply chain crisis as a wake-up call. The destiny of South Korea isn't to pick a side in global conflicts. Its destiny is to be a true neutral country that intensely studies both communist democracy and liberal democracy, synthesizing them to serve the entire world.
So the universe is basically taking away their garbage bags to force a shift in national consciousness. The pain is a deliberate, engineered prompt for reflection.
That is the exact mechanism the speaker proposes.
So if the root has been asleep at the wheel, where does that leave the branches? This is exactly why the text pivots to the Middle East. If South Korea is failing its grand duty, the source argues the rest of the world is collapsing under the weight of its own mismanagement.
Right.
The speaker introduces a very unique perspective on the Middle East, specifically regarding its underground resources.
We see a total reframing of what economists usually call the resource curse. The standard economic view is that massive resource wealth in developing nations often leads to corruption, authoritarianism, or economic stagnation.
Sure, yeah.
But this source frames the oil wealth spiritually. The oil was cosmic bait.
Cosmic bait, I love that phrasing. The text says that the region was historically impoverished, so God gave them this incredible underground gift for a specific reason, to draw the world's attention, wealth, and people to their doorstep.
And here is where we need to be very clear. The source material uses highly specific, deeply critical language regarding major world religions to explain what went wrong with that bait. Our role in this deep dive is to neutrally map out the speaker's philosophical framework so you can understand the logic of the text.
Right, we aren't endorsing or taking sides on these viewpoints at all, but we have to look at the terminology being used to understand the source.
Exactly.
And the terminology is definitely intense. The speaker refuses to use the word religion. Instead, they refer to these historical institutions as cartels. They specifically talk about a Jesus organization cartel and a law or Torah organization cartel.
It's a very modern, almost corporate critique of spiritual history. The source claims that these immense oil resources were originally meant to elevate the people of the Middle East, freeing them from basic survival needs so they could become God's army for peace.
Wow.
With their material needs met by the world's reliance on their resources, they were supposed to dedicate themselves to higher spiritual learning and mediating global harmony.
But the text argues the exact opposite happened. They took the resources, built massive, rigid organizations, and just fractured.
Yep.
The speaker notes that the moment institutionalized religion enters the fray, the spiritual mission is dead. The mentality becomes, I believe in this God, you are the opposite, therefore you are the enemy.
In this framework, the original founders of these faiths, Jesus, Buddha, and so on, have been completely disconnected from the modern factions operating in their names.
Right.
People are utilizing those names as historical branding to run organizational cartels, basically fighting over geopolitical influence and resource control.
Which brings us to the inevitable question. How does this critique of the Middle East solve the NAFTA shortage for the person sitting in the audience in South Korea?
Because the ultimate solution, according to the source, rests squarely back on the shoulders of the root.
Okay.
It is Korea's administrative and spiritual job to study these regions, to deeply analyze the historical and cultural fault lines causing these conflicts, and to help the people in the Middle East evolve past this constant state of warring.
And if the root doesn't intervene with empathy and understanding?
Then resource wars will simply continue in a perpetual loop.
Wow. And if the Middle East was supposed to be the spiritual engine of the world and failed, where does that leave the great ideological engines of the 20th century?
That's a huge point in the text.
Yeah, this is where the transcript swings into some incredibly bold, specific geopolitical prophecies regarding the world's superpowers. The speaker asserts that the current global instability isn't just about shipping lanes. It's about the collapse of massive political ideologies, starting with Russia.
The text acknowledges that Russia controls a sprawling, massive territory filled with resources, but the prophecy here is stark.
Very.
The source claims that the foundational ideology of Russian communism has spiritually failed, leaving the population in a state of deep structural suffering. And God, or the cosmic order, is actively orchestrating a scenario where Russia will eventually hit a breaking point.
And they'll have no choice but to reach out and hold South Korea's hand.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The speaker actually says that if they don't reach out, Russia will simply cease to exist. But there's a massive, flashing warning light attached to this prediction for the Korean audience.
A critical warning. When a massive, resource-rich nation like Russia reaches out in a moment of vulnerability, the immediate impulse for a highly developed capitalist society is exploitation.
Right. The instinct is to say, perfect, let's go in there, secure the resources, and make a fortune.
But the speaker explicitly forbids that mindset. They warn that if Koreans go in acting greedy, trying to leverage the situation for financial gain, both nations will spiritually and economically die.
Wow.
The mandate is to help. Korea must step in to help reorganize the very roots of communism, to bring genuine stability to the Russian people, rather than just extracting their wealth.
It's a consistent theme in the text. You cannot act solely for your own benefit. The root must stabilize the tree. And if you think the Russia prediction is bold, the source's mapping of China's future is breathtaking in its specificity.
It really is. The text asserts that Chinese communism, as a living, breathing ideology, is already a ghost. It is dead in spirit.
Right.
What remains is simply the party cartel, there's that word again, applying the cartel concept to political organizations now. This cartel exists purely to maintain its own power, operating as an oppressive mechanism over the people.
And because the ideology is dead, the speaker predicts the imminent dissolution of the Chinese Communist Party. They actually refer to this coming collapse as heaven's work.
Yeah.
But the text goes further and claims that China will structurally fracture into 5 distinct regions. I was marveling at how specific this is. The speaker points out that this perfectly mirrors the 5 stars on the Chinese flag.
Yeah, that detail is fascinating.
Why does the source believe this functionally happens?
Because in this framework, when an overarching artificial ideological control mechanism collapses, the land naturally reverts to its historical, ethnic, and cultural fault lines. The speaker views this fracturing as an inevitable cosmic correction for decades of mismanagement.
The text even includes a contingency warning. It states that if these newly formed 5 regions immediately succumb to greed and fail to manage their internal affairs properly, the fragmentation won't stop.
No, it accelerates.
Right, they will fracture further into 10 regions, and if the greed continues, it splits into 20, essentially dissolving a massive superpower back into a scattered landscape of small ethnic minority states that are completely incapable of functioning on the global stage.
Which brings us to the crux of why this is being discussed at all. Why is a speaker detailing the imminent collapse of major world powers to an audience fundamentally worried about their supply chains?
It seems like a tangent, right?
It does, but it sets the stage for Korea's ultimate administrative role. As these massive nations fracture, suffer, and struggle to govern themselves in the power vacuum, the text insists that Korea must be prepared.
Not with weapons.
Right, not with an expansionist military strategy, but with a profound capacity for empathy and administrative wisdom. Korea must act as the soft power safety net, ready to embrace and guide these struggling regions.
Okay, let's ground this for a second. If I'm a regular citizen sitting in that audience in 2026, and I'm being told that my country needs to prepare to spiritually and administratively guide a fracturing China, a collapsing Russia, and a warring Middle East bigger,
You're panicking?
I am feeling entirely overwhelmed. How does an everyday person who works a 9-to-5 job even begin to prepare for a mandate of that scale?
That is precisely where the text pivots from these apocalyptic geopolitical visions directly into highly pragmatic modern homework. The speaker outlines a 100-day study plan.
Yes, the AI study plan. The speaker essentially tells the audience, get your phone out, open YouTube, use artificial intelligence.
The source identifies a core vulnerability here. The Korean people currently know very little about the inner workings, the histories, or the deep-seated grievances of places like Iran, Saudi Arabia, or Israel.
They're watching the news, but they don't really understand the why behind the conflicts.
Exactly. So the instruction is incredibly practical. Study one foreign country a day.
You don't need a massive travel budget or your university degree. You just type a prompt into an AI. You ask it, who are the people of Iran, Summarize their history, their culture, and their pain points for me so I can understand them.
And the math the speaker lays out here is compelling. If you study one country a day, in just over 3 months, 100 days, you will have built a working, empathetic understanding of the entire globe. You will mentally and spiritually grasp 100 nations.
But how does me sitting in my living room reading an AI summary about Saudi Arabia actually unblock a shipping lane or fix a naphtha shortage? What is the actual mechanic at play here?
It goes back to the principle of the descendants of heaven. The text argues that when the root is ignorant, its blind anxiety radiates outward, causing global chaos.
Wow, okay.
But when the root becomes informed, when the citizens understand the historical why behind a conflict rather than just judging the what, a shift in collective consciousness occurs. The speaker introduces the phrase, 1 equals 100.
Meaning what exactly?
This means that a single, enlightened, deeply informed citizen energetically stabilizes a massive portion of the broader population. It's an administrative readiness. If the citizens replace panic with understanding, the national vibration stabilizes, which then acts as an anchor for the global consciousness.
So by understanding the world, you diffuse the tension that causes the conflicts that block the supply chains in the first place.
Yes.
And the text actually puts a hard date on when all this studying and stabilizing reaches its zenith, the year 2040.
This raises an important question, though. What is the end goal of all this studying and helping? By 2040, the speaker envisions the rise of a Korean empire. But we have to completely redefine what the word empire means in this framework. This is an empire of help.
It's not an empire built by marching armies across borders or firing missiles. It's an empire built entirely by gravitational pull.
Precisely. As these smaller, fractured states, the pieces of China, the remnants of Russia, the struggling nations of the Middle East realize they cannot survive the chaos alone, they will voluntarily seek out South Korea for protection, administrative guidance, and help.
Wow.
By simply opening its arms and acting as a capable, empathetic administrator, Korea becomes a massive global empire of peace.
And the ultimate symbol of this new global order is the South Korean flag. The text claims that this flag, which already literally embodies the cosmic philosophy of yin and yang, the balance of opposing forces, will transcend its status as a national banner.
Yeah.
It will become a global symbol of divinity.
The speaker paints an image of other nations actively asking to fly the Korean flag alongside their own. The text even suggests that instead of crosses or traditional religious iconography, the Korean flag might be placed in temples worldwide as the ultimate representation of cosmic balance and peaceful administration.
It is a staggering escalation. We went from a shortage of plastic garbage bags to a new global world order symbolized by the yin-yang flag. But to explain the actual fuel running this new empire, the text makes one final, massive philosophical leap. We are moving out of geopolitics and straight into subatomic physics.
This is where the geopolitical strategy merges completely with spiritual mechanics. We have to acknowledge the whiplash here, but the text claims that human beings are not merely biological creatures reacting to an economy. We are quite literally gods.
Gods who have just finished a very long, very painful phase of growing up.
Yes. The source explains that humanity has finally exited its historical growth phase, which was characterized by war, scarcity, and struggle, and is now entering its activity phase as fully realized divine beings.
And the actual physical substance of this divinity.
The speaker explicitly identifies it as quantum energy.
So what does this all mean? This is the part that completely reframes the entire transcript. The idea is that human consciousness isn't just an abstract concept, it is a physical force. The text explains that every single word you speak, every action you take, and every thought you harbor generates invisible quantum energy that overlaps and integrates directly into the fabric of the universe.
It operates somewhat like a metaphysical interpretation of the observer effect in physics. When you speak or act, you are injecting a specific frequency of quantum energy into the cosmos. You are literally collapsing wave functions and altering the geopolitical atmosphere around you.
Which brings us all the way back to the very first question from the audience member about the economy. The reason you shouldn't be consumed by worry over inflation or the stock market or hoarding garbage bags is because that localized panic is negative quantum energy.
If you are vibrating with anxiety, fear, and greed over a plastic bag, you are actively destabilizing the global collective consciousness. You are contributing to the very chaos that blocked the Strait of Hormuz.
So it's a feedback loop.
Exactly. Therefore, the source insists that the ultimate cosmic duty of the descendants of heaven is to live joyfully. Joy is not a luxury. It is a mandate.
The speaker is incredibly blunt. At the very end of the transcript, they tell the audience, "You won't starve to death today, so live joyfully." The logic is an unbroken chain. If you are joyful, the nation is joyful. If the nation is joyful, it acts as a stabilizing quantum anchor for the rest of the world.
It's a profound shift in personal responsibility. In this framework, you aren't just responsible for managing your own mood. Your joy is a required functional utility for the survival and stabilization of humanity.
To summarize this incredible journey, we started with a very real, tangible fear. The Strait of Hormuz is blocked, naphtha is scarce, and a citizen is worried about everyday survival.
Right.
And the source took that mundane panic and transformed it into a cosmic mandate. It said, don't blame the shipping lanes. Look at the state of your own consciousness. You are the roots of the world tree. You need to use tools like AI to aggressively educate yourselves about the world, to replace judgment of the Middle East with profound empathy, and to prepare to act as the administrative safety net for a fracturing China and Russia. Because by 2040, the world will require an empire of help, and that empire runs entirely on the quantum energy of your own joy.
It is a remarkable synthesis. It takes macroeconomics, geopolitical forecasting, and highly specific regional histories and binds them all together with deeply personal spiritual responsibility.
It takes the immense weight of the world's problems and places the solution right in the middle of your daily routine.
Which leaves us with a fascinating thread to pull on as we wrap up this analysis. If we entertain the source's ultimate premise that our words, our attitudes, and our daily actions are literal quantum energy that ripples outward, butterfly effect style, to either stabilize or destabilize the globe, it completely shifts how you view your immediate surrounding.
Oh, without a doubt.
We've spent this whole time talking about global supply chains, the movement of oil, helium, and naphtha across oceans. But what about your personal supply chain? The people you interact with every single day? Your friends, your family, your colleagues? If you are the root of your own personal ecosystem, what kind of energy are you pumping into that system today? Are you injecting panic, division, and anxiety? Or are you injecting the kind of joyful, empathetic energy that physically stabilizes the people around you?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. Powerful reminder that maybe fixing the broken mechanisms of the world really does start with the exact energy you bring to the breakfast table. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.